Well, as we have been hearing, this week is going to be a warm week finally across the state of Pennsylvania, and it has us all thinking about the summer ahead and those lazy, hazy, crazy days of summer. What are they going to be like? It has inspired us to make a lazy, hazy, crazy connection with the bunker, where Paul Knight and his long-range forecasting tools are emerging from their winter slumber. Hello, Paul.
Hi, Fred, and indeed, we actually even have the bunker doors open, but don't tell anybody about that because the animals and all the wildlife can come in too. So
now, usually when we are trying to forecast the future, we like to think about the past, and I see, I can actually see there, if I squint, that you have some of the past up on your magic board.
I do, Fred, because let's begin by what it was like last summer, because there are, as you'll see in just a little bit, this summer has many of the same ingredients, so a good way to start is with what we would call persistence. And in this case, notice that the temperatures across North America, this is from, or U.S. I should say, from June 1st to the end of August, were near or slightly below normal east of the Rockies. We had a hard time getting very warm, and it was relatively moist too. This is precipitation. See a lot of greens in there. Of course, it was very wet down in Texas with Harvey. But even here in Pennsylvania, it was one of those summers that had plenty of rain. There were a few places that were dry at times. And part of that was because the ocean temperatures, which are very similar this year at the bottom, last year at the top, and they're looking similar in terms of ocean temperature anomalies, at least as of a few weeks ago. However, if we focus specifically on where the biggest differences are found, and that would be here in the tropical Pacific, whereas last year it was fairly close to seasonal temperatures, a very, very weak La Nina. This year it's actually a moderate La Nina. Also the tropical Atlantic has cooled off. And if we just take into account the fact that that's the difference between last year and this year, this is what the likely temperature pattern would be across North America in this case, not just the U.S., for the months of June, July, and August, the departures from normal, the probabilities, I should say. And notice a fairly clear signal that east of the Mississippi River, it would be cooler than average here in the eastern part of North America.
Now, it has been relatively moist, Paul, in particular from East Texas, lower Mississippi Valley, up along the west slopes of the Appalachians, even into western Pennsylvania. And normally, that's one of those considerations when we're looking at summer forecasting, isn't it?
It is, Fred. In fact, that's what we would technically call one of those boundary conditions, which can influence the seasonal temperatures. And when the ground has been moist over a large area like that, especially at the beginning of the growing season, the sun's energy has to first go into evaporating the moisture out of the ground before it can heat the ground, which then heats the air. So yeah, that would actually tip the balances toward cool as well, especially from that moist area eastward.
What I want to know is, what is John Neese doing pouring in on this segment?
Well, you know, John said, I have some things to say.
And what does he have to say?
Well, actually, we're going back to one of those XYZs about a month or so ago when John was emphasizing how unusual it was for March to be colder than February. And he pointed out these years, there were only 5 prior to this year. Oddly enough, we have back-to-back cases. So if we look at that as being an important factor in terms of analog, and then we also consider the anomalies that we've already experienced during the month of April, that is cold in the northern plains and hot in the southwest, and as far as precipitation, it's been quite dry in the southwest, in fact, virtually no precipitation in parts of Arizona and Southern California, and quite moist in the Pacific Northwest, Washington State, and also surprisingly moist, as you mentioned, Fred, in the Ohio Valley and Tennessee valleys. So if we look at years that had similar conditions in April and those 5 years that had Marches that were colder than February's and put together the composite analog of those, this is the temperature pattern that would be noticed during the period June through August across the U.S. And once again, look at this signal again. It's pretty clear, cool from the Great Lakes and Middle Plains all the way into the northeastern part of the U.S. And precipitation pattern would look something like this. Wet in the southern plains. Actually, this would be a godsend to these people because they've had those terrible fires in parts of Oklahoma, and also relatively moist in the northeast. If we break it down into specific months, so here's what June temperature would look like. There, not much of a signal. If it's cool, it's primarily in the upper Midwest. Pennsylvania is kind of a draw. Look at July, though. July would be the cool month if there is going to be one. in the Northeast. And as far as August is concerned, looking similar to June. If anything, if there's any warm month, it's probably going to be the month of August in the Northeast. And to summarize, Fred, I call this a close cousin to 2017. That is the summer outlook for Pennsylvania 2018. If there's going to be heat waves, I think they'll be closer to the start and the end of the season. So that would be June-ish and late in August. Looks like another case of plenty of just-in-time rainfall, so above average rainfall, but there'll be gaps where there'll be some dry times. Folks will get a bit nervous. And not as cool as last summer, but I think when we take those 90 days, I think we'll still have the majority of them averaging slightly below average, Fred.
Well, that seems to me to be entirely agreeable, Paul. Kind of, not too hot, just-in-time rain. I think you've done an excellent job for the summer ahead. I guess we'll find out.
Well, we'll find out, yeah. And if I'm back in the fall, you'll know it worked out.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Paul. And that is the Summer Outlook, and we'll be back in a moment with more.